What's up, man? How you doing today?
Hey, bro, I'm great. How are you doing?
Good, awesome, man. It's a nice morning podcast.
Yep.
You got your podcast as well, right? It's called what's it? Know Your Physio?
Yep. That's it. Discover your
Yeah.
science, optimize your life. That's me.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, just start out because you have a lot of stuff you do, and could you just give everyone an explanation of really what it is and the science behind it and your goals with your clients?
For sure. I mean, you know how nowadays we have like unlimited access to information. We've got AI, anything you want to learn about health and fitness, someone's talking about it online. There's endless podcasts. Like there's so much information and everybody has the intention to get healthier, to get fitter, to live better, live longer. That's great. But there's a quote by one of my favorite authors, Elizabeth King, and it goes, "Process saves us from the poverty of our intentions." And what I'm trying to say here is like what people really need if they want to look, feel, perform incredible, and live as long as possible is they need to find a process that works for them. They need to understand how all of this content fits into their unique context, into their body, their mind, their lifestyle, so they can actually accomplish that meaningful change in a way that makes sense for them. Otherwise, with all this information, like everybody with an iPhone or an Android has the same access to this information, right? So if you apply as much as you can, really in this day and age, it's going to be mediocre at best. So how do you achieve that optimal health? How do you optimize your health? You have to understand your context and how the right content fits into it, and when to apply it and how to do it in a truly effective and sustainable way. So, my background is in physiology, nutrition, psychology, and neuroscience. I've had the chance to learn a lot over the years. And the reason I got into this, the reason I became so obsessed is because I was very detached from my body, from my health for over a decade as I took Adderall to get by in school. I was on the maximum prescribed dose. And even though I was taking all this, all these smart drugs, I was a mediocre student and I hated school. I barely scraped by. It wasn't until I discovered the concept of neuroplasticity during a summer program at a university while I was still in high school that I realized that I can change and upgrade my brain. Like neuroplasticity is something that, is still relatively new. And for a long time, we thought that only children can like change and grow and upgrade their brains. And now we know that anyone can do it no matter what stage of life that they're in. So when I learned this and I was on a college campus where I had unlimited access to all these different, habits and routines and things that can upgrade your brain. Like for example, I had unlimited access to the gym, unlimited access to the dining hall, to social life. I was able to sleep because I was on a summer break and I wasn't medicated. All of a sudden, man, like 3 months of like learning this stuff and applying it, I became and felt confident for the first time in my life. I went from being this skeletal, anxious guy with no friends, literally zero friends and zero social life. I had a stutter. Like I couldn't talk to anybody because I was so afraid of messing up. And all of a sudden, I was feeling confident. I gained like 25 pounds of muscle in a few months. And I was like, holy shit, like I could really do something here. And I became obsessed. So, something that you should know about folks with ADD, if you don't know this already, and a lot of folks tuning in can probably identify with this. When you have ADD and you have those low baseline levels of dopamine, most things don't interest you and you don't want to do them. And it requires a lot of effort and a lot of like procrastination to like get things done. But there's those few things that actually interest you, and people with ADD can like hyper focus on those things, and it's like all they want to do. So I went from like being a guy that was so detached from society that all I wanted to do was play like online video games because it's the only place where I felt like I could actually connect and express myself and level up in life. Or I was fishing. I love fishing. Those two things, man, I became like an expert in. And when I finally learned about neuroplasticity and I started to see the connection between like the science I was seeing and I was reading about in textbooks and like leveling up in my personal life, I became obsessed and that became what I started to hyper focus on. So over the years, man, I've had a chance to learn a lot selfishly. And now I get to express and share that in a very selfless way because not only do I know a lot, but I live and breathe what I believe. And I'm a living example of what's possible when you take that science, you learn about yourself, and you apply this endless content within your unique context to perform higher and live better. So yeah, that's a little intro from me. There's much more to the story, much more we can get into. But yeah, man, I basically I went to school to become as credible as I could possibly be. I did my undergrad in exercise physiology with a minor in psychology. I went and did a master's in applied physiology and nutrition. Unfortunately, that was in the middle of COVID, and I couldn't finish that degree, which was a pain. But my mentor and the head of the program suggested that I work on my business in the meantime, and I did that. I had a business that I started with a Harvard interventional radiologist in lifestyle medicine, and we focused on that, grew that business, and then I pivoted, had my own personal brand that I started, and now I work with like younger, ambitious, high performers and help them prevent disease that I was seeing working with this other doctor. Anyway, the point is, now I've had the chance to learn and do a lot through my business and my mission, and I'm actually now doing my master's in biomedical neuroscience along the way. So, I want to make sure that I have as much credibility and that I'm as scientific as possible in my approach. So, yeah, man, in a nutshell, that's me and what I do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like what you said. That there's too much information out there. You have a phone. It's like one of my teachers always says, "Well, we have a phone. We have access to all the information. Why isn't everybody smart and wise?"
Exactly.
Right? It's because it's like just information that's not applied is pointless, right? And then information, knowledge shared is the wisdom, right? And that's what we gain. I like what you said. It's like I first gained it selfishly for myself, then I shared it with others, right? Because it's you learn at a way deeper level when you're sharing with others. It's one thing to because it's one thing to get information applied for ourselves because that's one perspective and one experience, just ourselves. But when we're sharing it, we're multiplying our own knowledge, which gains us wisdom. That's what we really
Exactly.
lock it in.
The best
Yeah,
way to
so
learn
that
is to teach.
yeah, exactly. I love hearing when people, they said, "Hey, I went through this struggle, found a solution, and I shared it, and now I'm helping everybody else." And it's like, I think that's a good way to, if you want success and fulfillment in your life, it's like find something you can be really good at and share it.
Mhm.
Do you
And
still have, what's that?
I can quickly jump in and just say something about the phones, right? Like, our phones are, just objectively speaking, the most powerful tool that every single one of us, every single person listening, like your phone is the most powerful tool that you have. And 99.9% of people, for 99.9% of people, it's the biggest like detriment and distraction and waste of time. It is so powerful. If you're not mindful of it and you don't use it intentionally, it will destroy your quality of life and like erase time on this planet. Like, I challenge every single person tuning in right now to go on your phone, go to the settings, look at your screen time, see what the weekly average is, and multiply that out for the remaining years that you expect to have on this planet. It ends up being years for people on their phone. And
That's
break that
scary.
down into how much time you're spending on social media, how much time you're spending on YouTube, how much time you're spending doing bullshit that isn't actually going to give you a better quality of life or the experiences that you tune into when you're looking at somebody else's life on social media. Put the phone away and start doing the things that you want to do. Take the first step, go outside. Like, I have, and we can get into this later. I have actually just did a podcast on this, a solo podcast on my platform about how to set up your phone to be a tool and not a distraction. There's like a series of steps that you can follow to make it way more intentional. But like, dude, the phone is so powerful. Most people don't understand the power in your phone.
It's extremely
So,
powerful, but it's like anything in life, like even our personal gifts, right? It's usually our biggest gift can be our biggest vice, right? Our biggest power can work against us,
yeah,
internally. And our phone, I like how you said that, right? We have to use our phone, everything responsibly, right? Because anything, there's a Greek axiom that says, nothing in excess, right? It's first know thyself, nothing in excess. So it's like anything can be good up to a point, right? Like even food, even information, right? Information is good, but too much information is works against you, right? But I like how you said again, it's like I created a plan, I created a structure, right? Because a lot of people have, people have $1 million ideas all the time. They say, "Hey, I want to do this thing, I want to do that thing." And it's like the separation between the idea and the action is the plan, having a clear step by step plan, right? And I talk to a lot of people about this, but it's not, if somebody's on a self improvement path, it's not do everything at once. It's find somebody that can clarify that plan, do step by step, just 1% at a time, so you can constantly improve.
yeah, and a goal without a plan is just a wish.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like that's the thing. It's we'll just overwhelm ourselves, right? I try to when I work with people, it's okay, here's your goal. The first thing I do with people is like, here's your goal and what's in the way. And I figure out what's in the way and we just chop down everything, right? Because success is very subtractive, right? It's just do the little things that actually work consistently and you'll get there.
Hmm.
Um, so when you first really discovered neuroplasticity, you were in college, I believe, right?
No, I was in high school. I was 18.
Okay, cool.
I was
Yeah,
17.
yeah, for me, that was like when I started my spiritual path. I didn't know where to go, right? So it's kind of like we just grab that one thing that seems like, okay, that seems like the next step for me, right? So for me, it was hypnotherapy. And that was kind of my like aha moment. I was like, wait, I can actually sort of reprogram myself. Like, how to, before that, I had no awareness, like my subconscious or how that was affecting my life and everything. Because I think it can be easy to say, oh, this is how life is, right?
Hmm.
And you're just like, a lot of I have conversations with people all the time. They're like, yeah, well, I've unfortunately had this one guy who was very out of shape a few weeks ago. He goes, this is my destiny. I've accepted my destiny. So why? We can always, like we said, it's like we can always shift and change and rewire ourselves, right? But we just need the right program to do it, you know.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think anytime somebody has that breakthrough moment of like, hey, I'm actually in the driver's seat, I can do this, then life just takes off from there.
Hmm. Agreed.
You know. So when you mentioned you're working with high performers, and what are some of are they coming in with similar stuff that you worked through originally, or is it just all kind of case by case? And what are the results that they're getting?
Yeah. So first, let's define a high performer, because I think right off the bat, when we say high performer, it can come off as a very pretentious, label, like, oh, I work with all these special people, you don't, or like, oh yeah, like I reserve my services for like all these rich people or like incredible people. I would define a high performer as anybody that is ambitious and is here on this planet conscious of the fact and with the privilege to demand the best of themselves.
I like that.
Okay. So that can be anybody, really. Like it's within all of us to demand the best. And so I've worked with everyone from like high performing students, like literally kids, like teenagers that want to get into the best school possible. Their parents will hire me and I make sure that they're getting all the sleep, nutrition, everything that they need to wake up feeling incredible, energized, focused, prepare for their exams, prepare for interviews, and get into the best schools. Like I've helped a lot of kids get into Ivy League schools. And then I've helped people that are much older, all the way up to like 50s and 60s that are CEOs of multi-billion dollar companies, Fortune 500 companies. And I help them like just radically upgrade their quality of life and live longer, just objectively. Like, for example, we know that the most highly correlated metric with longevity is VO2 max, which we can get into. And I've helped men at that age go from an average, mediocre VO2 max to a superior category VO2 max. So they quite literally, almost like I handed them more years,
Yeah, yeah,
more healthy years. You know what I mean? And that's priceless, especially for people at that level. And then in between, and I don't want to say like in between, like as in like, I don't want to put people in these buckets, but I've helped all kinds of people. And that includes world champion athletes, so everything from like World Series of Poker champions to Le Mans racing champions, 24-hour Le Mans, to like, US Open Grand Slammers and champions, um, and much more. Yeah, like I get to help, and then I also get to help, folks that are young, entrepreneurial, and basically want to lay out a foundation ahead of time with their well-being to leverage their health so that they don't end up getting in their own way later on in life. As I mentioned earlier, I worked with this doctor, Dr. Moises Roisenthal, who's a Harvard doctor, interventional radiologist, obesity medicine doctor, and my work with him was extremely rewarding. Most of our clients were people that had spent their lives living a certain way, and now they had this chronic disease, and at a certain point it's extremely difficult to undo that effect. They have sacrificed their health because they think they're getting more time to focus on what matters, and oftentimes it's not the case. You can actually leverage your health to get better quality time, more clarity, more energy to power you through and do the things that are actually meaningful for you, and in the process lay the foundations for an even longer and healthier life and a better quality of life to reinvest in these buckets. So anyway, I get to help all kinds of people that demand the best of themselves, people that are self-aware, people that know when they're inevitably, they end up being the common denominator between where they are and where they want to be in their lives.
yeah. It's great. I was kind of like smiling because comparing your thing to mine. It's like the same thing. It's the same parallel, but just different ways of helping our clients. And I like what you said before about I help everybody, because I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I only help celebrities, I only help entrepreneurs, I only help." They have they kind of separate it, right? And it's like I believe if you have something good, it's for everybody. What you said specifically, it's like I help ambitious people, so it doesn't matter where you are, who you are. It's like, are you willing to do the work and get the results, right? It's a people who want to be their best selves, And it's funny because I also like you're like, yeah, I help young people and help older people, and I have the same thing, and you're saying, oh, there's the in between. I'm like, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's good that we can speak each other's language.
Yeah, because the thing about the younger group of people I work with is they need the structure and the plan and consistency to build the longevity, right? Because they have all the energy and stuff. Now the older group is, similar to what you're saying. It's like they're in a different state because they've sacrificed their years before. Because I have a lot of guys that come to me, they want, on the spiritual path, it's the physical aspects come first, obviously, but then you can stack on those higher spiritual aspects. And what happens with my older guys is, they'll work 5, 6 decades and then they'll say, oh, I sacrificed everything for that and now I have success and money and stuff. But I want, my health is deteriorating. I don't have spiritual practice. My relationships aren't good, right? So it's like those guys, we have to focus on higher aspects. The younger people, we have to focus on more physical, more structure, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I will say that while, I get to help all kinds of people at the end of the day, my time is very valuable. There's an extremely high demand for me and what I do. And it's just, naturally with the exposure that I have and with the brand that I've built, and the recognition that we've gotten, it's just objectively speaking, nowadays what I offer is a very premium service. Like I take pride in offering a world-class service. That's what people sign up for. I have a client of mine. I can't mention who he is. I can't mention his name. But what I will say is he's a board member of Airbnb and he's in the luxury hospitality world. He's a multi-billionaire. I was flying around the world with him in his Gulfstream G550, basically monitoring and doing everything related to health, well-being, longevity, performance, making sure that I got all the testing that I needed from the best doctors in the world to help everything from like his personal chef to prepare exactly the right meals with the right macro and micronutrients. And you wouldn't figuring out what snacks are going to go on his jet and much more. I mean, you wouldn't believe all the bells and whistles. And I flew all over the world with him. And he had a line that I'll never forget, and that changed my life. And in fact, it broke me, and in the best way,
That's how it
but
changed your
at the
life,
time
right?
in the worst way.
Yeah,
And it goes, luxury doesn't sell, it delivers. When you're talking like premium, it sells itself and it's all in the delivery. It's all in how you do what you do and making sure that you can effectively manage expectations and that you're showing up 100%.
yeah,
And
like
when I was in that environment, dude, I was among the best in the world, period, because that was the standard. And at that point, you can't quit. Like you just have to be 100, and I don't mean 99, I mean 100% all the time, 24/7, 365. And so, you know that was something that really helped me level up mentally, physically, spiritually. And I don't work with him anymore, we're very close friends, but I work with a lot of people like him, and now it's like second nature to deliver at that level. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've had the chance to get the exposure that we have. And yes, while I love to help all kinds of people, it is a little more curated now because of the demand, because of the how premium and exclusive this service is, and the team that I have built around me. I have a world class team. I take pride in my team like you wouldn't imagine. I have a world class team that helps me deliver this at scale. So yes, that's in a nutshell. It's a little more select, and I like to provide as much value as I can, for free online through my podcast and my content. But like I said earlier, content can only get you so far. However, the twist that I add to mine is like I try to provoke that curiosity and I invite you to learn more about your physiology, doing all the testing that you need to do and collaborating with the right specialists to make sense of that data and what the lifestyle habits could look like to help you have the right process to meet your intentions with something meaningful. So I invite people to discover their science, to do all the testing, and to take their health very seriously and to be very objective about it. Because obviously, all of us like to talk about the subjective experience, right? Like how we feel generally and how we look. That's relatively superficial. There's data that can help change the trajectory of your life in ways you would never imagine, but you have to do the right testing and get the right interpretation. You have to do it now, not later, because it matters now. And if you don't make time for your health now, you're going to have to make time for your healthcare later, which is way more expensive. You're going to suffer a lot more then than you are going to the gym and eating healthier foods today. So,
that's a great point.
yeah.
It's like, people say, oh no, I'll do it. It's, the best time to do it is now, right? And people who really care themselves, care about themselves. It's like, what do they, talking about all the guys you work with, right? It's like the number one thing they understand is how to utilize their time, very extremely efficiently, right? And even if you're talking about anything, when people are asking me questions about like how to make much money, I'm like, well, how do you value your time? That's the number one thing. If I see somebody who's showing up too late to like a meeting with me or missing things or whatever, and I see they're not utilizing their time, like that's number one, right? And the same thing with your health, same thing with your spiritual path. It's like the best time to do it is right now because it's just going to compound. And what the difference is like nobody's ever guessed their way to success, and people are trying to do it by themselves, right? They'll try to read a book, they'll try to go maybe to a biohacking convention or something, right? And it's much harder to put all those pieces together by yourself, right? It's harder if you do all these tests and stuff to read and understand those, right? So the best thing in anything we're doing is go find a mentor that can break that down to us, put in a system, keep us accountable. Because another thing, it's like we don't unfortunately, we don't care about ourselves as much as we like to think we do. So having somebody to keep us accountable and keep us on the mark is crucial. And then you just accelerate your progress because you're not wasting your time.
Yeah,
So
that's the other side of the equation. It's like, all right, now that we have the testing, we have all the right information, we understand what works for your context and your lifestyle and your goals and how relevant it is. All right, now let's actually do it. I need to hold you accountable. Data helps hold us accountable. It shows us where we need to act, how we need to act, and make sure that we're acting in the right way and at the right time. Yeah, accountability is a huge part of what I do. That alone, regardless of data testing, like that alone helps me help people transform.
yeah, I bet the data is really reassuring as well too, right? Because if you're going to the gym by yourself and you're like very overweight, you're gonna have to, if you're not seeing actual markers and actual like progression there that's tracked, you're gonna be like, this isn't working, right? So I
Yeah,
think
because
having
looking at yourself in the mirror every day isn't good enough.
yeah, yeah, I like that. Um, what were we saying about the accountability is where would you see people get stuck, right? Because we can have the perfect plan, but then get stuck in taking action, right? Because I see where people get stuck between plan and action is their self belief, self worth, stuff like that. They
Or
think,
also
oh well, what's up?
also like analysis by paralysis. Like they have too many things that they can do, so they don't choose one thing and do it consistently enough to actually see a difference.
Right. So when you're working with somebody, you break it down and like, hey, just do this next, do that next, right? So do you have it? Is it structured in phases? Is that how it works?
I mean, yes and no. So when I start working with people, we go through all the testing, and I mean, like everything. I have them do a very safe, secure genetic test. I have them do an extremely comprehensive blood panel, like over 30 vials of blood, that then my functional medicine doctor interprets. I've got them, on a wearable device like a Whoop. They do a DEXA scan, gold standard for body composition. They'll do a VO2 max test, gold standard for cardiovascular performance and number one marker of longevity. I mean, and much more. I mean, that's the gist of it. And then I integrate all this in a HIPAA compliant platform that I have called Heads Up Health that we like white labeled. And I can see all the data in one place, see the mass landscape of somebody's data. The first place that I start, because we identify, what are the top and most relevant KPIs for this individual, key performance indicators, just like in a business.
Yeah, sounds
What are
like
the
it.
most relevant KPIs? For a lot of my high performers, they tend to be, VO2 max, which again, we'll get into in a second. I'll explain what that is and why it's relevant. Number two, heart rate variability, which is a measure of like your autonomic nervous system adaptability. Just to make it super simple, it's more complicated than that, but basically how adaptable you are. And that helps you with all things high performance, flow states, presence, recovery, etc. And then the next one is, yeah, like body composition is pretty relevant, right? For a lot of people, they want to gain muscle, lose fat. And not just for aesthetics, but objectively speaking, muscle is the organ of longevity. So we can get into that as well. So those tend to be like the top three. And then I typically start people after all the testing, I help them regulate their nervous system because through better sleep and recovery and better self regulation throughout the day, we lay the foundation for everything else that we get into to be more intuitive, easier, and they're going to have just more energy and clarity to make the right decisions and therefore have more sustainability and a better approach. Like we know that if you train according to your biometrics, like let's say you elicit that kind of, because exercise is a stressor, it's a hormetic stressor. The idea is that as long as you take enough time off and get good sleep and adequate nutrition, the stimulus and the destruction of muscle fiber that you're creating in the gym, that creates an adaptive response. Your body wants to get stronger. It wants to become more prepared for the next time, but you have to have the recovery laid out. We know that if you train on high recovery days, high HRV days, and you recover on lower HRV days, you can get away with doing even half as much exercise for a better result. And this is well established among elite populations of athletes. I had Kristen Holmes, the VP of data science and performance from Whoop, on my podcast, and she took me through the entire study. It's incredible. So basically, all of a sudden now, like if you're being objective with your training, you are saving time and effort because you're going to wake up with more energy after if you master the recovery and the sleep. You're going to wake up with more energy, and with that little bit of stimulus that you get, you double down on the positive adaptive response. So you're saving time, you're saving effort, and you're maximizing for quality of life in between. That's just one example. That's one tiny example. So I typically help people get like the best sleep. And I mean, like, I help my clients get 100% sleep scores. And not 80, not 90. Like, I help them get 100% sleep scores. And then
Sick.
after that, we help them go into like nutrition. And all of a sudden now nutrition is way easier, more intuitive. You can be more logical, less like emotionally driven to eat because you have a more regulated nervous system, you have more regulated blood glucose, you have a higher insulin sensitivity, you have more energy that you want to spend. And then we get into, fitness and exercise programming for all things aesthetics, strength, power, high performance, longevity, mobility. And I have a background in exercise physiology, so it's a very personalized program and it's minimalistic. And then we go into all things like, flow states, peak performance, nootropics, mental health, preventing neurodegenerative diseases. So it's like sleep, nutrition, movement, mind. Those are like the four pillars. But in between, man, like I'm not just like regurgitating information for my clients. Like I'm understanding like, hey man, like how are you feeling? Like what's happening this today? What's happening this week? What's happening this month? How can I help you prepare to have this high performance lifestyle and help you do what's within reach? Like what is actually realistic and attainable for you? And what's the most relevant information that I can not just give you, but show you how it works. So by the time that we conclude our program, like you actually understand your science and like what to do and what situation and how. So like, let me give you the tools and let me show you how to use them. I'm a huge fisherman, so I love the analogy. Instead of giving a man a fish and eating for a night, teach a man to fish. But I will still give them the fish. I'm going to give you the fish, and I'm going to teach you how to fish.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. Yeah, it's
So
making
yeah,
that's what I do with my class. It's to empower people, right? It's because I wouldn't want somebody to constantly become. I mean, it would be good for business, but it wouldn't be good for them really long term, right? So it's building the man so they're able to be self sufficient. They're understanding this stuff as well. Like you're saying, teach them how to fish. They can understand this stuff as well. So when they take it into their life,
did you
maybe
say? Wait, sorry. Did you say it's not good for business, but it is good for them?
no, it's good for business, but it's not good for them long term. Is because like
Okay.
if we're just always like feeding them information, and they don't actually understand themselves. You know what I mean? That's what you're saying is like you're teaching them how to fish because you want them to understand it just as well as you do for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they can be more intuitive and they can keep themselves on track, and then it just becomes second nature to them.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. That's the goal, and there's a fine line because I like to help my clients, effectively graduate as soon as possible. Like I believe that the best coaches, right, there's zero codependency between a coach and a client. I want people to get the information, get the change that they signed up for, and have that sustainability, and then carry off on their own. But there's a fine line between helping them graduate as quickly as possible and making sure that this is actually sustainable. So typically, my programs are like 3, 6, or 12 months. A lot of that also has to do with like the kind of body composition change that they want to see. But I'd say most people, like 75%, choose a 6 month program. And I think that's a really good overall number for my specific coaching population. Yeah. So it has to be long enough for that to take place, but also not so long so that they feel good and they actually make the changes happen quickly and effectively.
Yeah, yeah, it's understandable. So what about so when somebody gets they're getting the results, right? They're moving their body, they're feeling good, their mind's clear. What they've had success in whatever they want to focus on, whether it's getting into a school, whether it's helping their business, performance athletes, whatever it is. What as we were talking like right before we started, what is next for them? Because like once you get your body and your mind feeling good, you become more open, more clear, and then it opens you up to higher levels of life, right? Beyond just the things, right? Beyond just the business, the money, the school, whatever it is, right? It opens you up to a higher way of being. And, I would say probably more aligns them with really who they truly are.
Yeah, there's a quote. Let me try to look this up because I can't remember now verbatim. I think it's pretty simple, but I might be overthinking it. But let me just quickly look this up. You know what? Fuck it. I'm not even going to look it up. I'm just going to say it. This is
What's
the
up?
way
Because
that
I
I
remember.
interpret it and the way I remember it. So it goes something like, you have to give people what they want in order to give them what they need. A
Hmm.
lot of people approach me with, "Hey, man, I want to look better, feel better, like live longer. Like I want to make sure objectively, like I'm on track for that." Great, like we'll do that, absolutely. Like that's what you're signing up for. What people tend to stick around for, and what they really love about my program, and it's not something that I'm not yeah, I'm spiritual, but I'm not a spiritual guide. Like I'm not a, like I'm not really that religious. Like, but what tends to happen is that when you give your body what it needs to thrive, and when you have this like, in the modern day, this sort of like alignment with evolutionarily preserved mechanisms, like in this modern day, you're living in such a way that your human body is aligned with our evolutionary design. Like basically, like, our modern world evolves exponentially. Our physiology evolves linearly. Like we are basically like physiologically identical to the way that we were thousands and millions of years ago, almost identical. But we're detached from this modern environment in that sense. Like there's a big gap. And so
What
I
do you
help people
mean?
like close that gap. Does that make sense?
What do you mean by detached? Because you said something actually at the very beginning of the podcast I like. You said when you were having the issues when you're a teenager, you felt detached, right? And when you're detached, it's like when you have that separation, whether it be with yourself, spiritually, whatever it is, you don't have the power to actually create what you want, right?
So
So
I'm so glad you brought this up because you're right. There is a link there. Then I've never drawn this parallel, so I appreciate the opportunity because this is brilliant. Like, dude, thank you. This is brilliant. So get this. Why was I taking Adderall? Just objectively, like zooming out. Why was I taking Adderall? My parents wanted to help me. They administered the medication. They got me in touch with a psychiatrist, right? But why? Because they were trying to help me acclimate to a broken school system. Okay. They were trying to help me be like everybody else. And that's what's required in the modern day for modern society to feel accomplished, and you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
support my
yeah.
self-esteem as a young person in a broken system. So that's a
Yeah, because the system doesn't support sort of the well-being on a higher level. It fits just the system fits a lot of logic, right? And when I work with people, we have to move beyond logic because logic can give structure and foundation, but it could be almost too much logic, kind of what we were saying before. Too much of anything can become a limitation, right? It can work against us, right? And it's think about the hemispheres of the brain, the right and left, right? Somebody who is on a higher genius level is able to access both sides, and a lot of people get, especially men, they get stuck in that very logical side. And we were saying this 2 days ago on a podcast. Life becomes very black and white. So it's sort of like with the Adderall. It's like, okay, well, you have to fit in this box. It's a very black and white world. Here, let's give you this, kind of dull you down so you can, it works. It makes sense, right?
Yeah, and all the health issues that I was experiencing were a consequence of trying to acclimate to this modern system. And so I felt detached from my body in the sense that like I didn't feel authentic. I didn't feel like me. I was putting myself aside to try to be someone that I wasn't, to make the people in modern society happy about another person coming into the workforce. You know what I mean? Like this
Yeah,
is like
exactly.
that's what school is for. It prepares you for the workforce. It doesn't prepare you to think for yourself.
Yeah, it
I mean,
doesn't.
obviously I ended up like getting really good at school, like because I realized school had an impact on my well-being and that I needed to learn certain things to teach. There are certain things about school that I love, but
Yeah,
at a young age, I mean, it was just such a broken environment. The point is that here's the parallel, right? It's like I became so detached as a consequence of trying to acclimate to this modern world. And I wasn't giving my body the foundations for well being. In fact, I was literally taking away from everything my brain actually needed to have my genius and to showcase what I was really capable of. Like, I wasn't socializing, right? I wasn't sleeping because I was jacked up on amphetamines, on Adderall, on 60 milligrams of Adderall XR every single day. So I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't socializing, I wasn't eating because I had no appetite. I was on amphetamines, like taking cocaine. You have no blood flow in the digestive tract. You're in the sympathetic state. Your body doesn't want to digest food. I was surviving on Ensure shakes. Like I wasn't eating. I was skeletal, and I didn't have the energy to exercise because I was exhausted. Like I was like burnt out. So, dude, those four things, you want to listen to neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, you want to grow your brain and your body, those are the four things you have to do.
you actually laid out, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Of course, yeah, I have a background in psychology, and yeah, exactly, right? Like
That's really
those
what you laid
basic
out. You're
needs
like
weren't met.
psychological safety, and you mentioned before it's like I wasn't socializing. So as soon as you got the physical things in place and your mind in place, then it opened you up, and you're able to socialize and have a more fulfilling life, right?
So if
It's
you want
like
to talk Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everything was stripped away from me, and it was impossible to achieve self-actualization given the conditions that I was, in.
But
It was
that's the
impossible.
I think that's the overarching goal of all that stuff, right? It's like the
Yeah,
goal isn't to. It's not all about just doing the thing. It's never about just doing the thing, right? The thing is always kind of like a step in the higher plan, right? It's like the ultimate goal is self actualization. So how do all these things, how do all these systems and structures and knowledge, how does that all ultimately lead into that stuff, right? How do we come from our sort of broken state and build ourselves and become to individuate and have our own self-expression, and that goes beyond that goes beyond like how you said, it goes beyond kind of the systems that are very black and white that tend to dull you down and keep you stuck, that keep you disconnected from yourself, right?
exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think that's why this stuff is cool to kind of blend sort of the spirituality and science, because I think they go hand in hand, right? It's like the the spirituality can be looked at as very like, oh, out there, whatever, but now it's actually cool because now science is really merging with spirituality, and it's becoming more of a holistic approach for people because they're doing both. They're doing, people are diving more into their spiritual paths, they're diving more into the science and the well-being and the health and all the psychological stuff, and people are just accelerating at a way faster pace now because there's that now.
And what you'll notice is if you actually read about some of the most incredible and famous, legendary scientists of all time, you'd think I think the average person would imagine that they're like, atheist or agnostic. And sure, some are. But I think the general idea, the general consensus is the closer you get to science and the more you learn about science, the more you realize that there has to be God. There
Yeah,
has to be something on the other side because it is just insane that these things are what they are and it's just it's absolutely insane. There's actually a quote I believe by
it's sort of like the science. It backs up one of my teachers. She's a physicist actually, and she's very well known in the spiritual and scientific space. What her content, she has a series on Gaia. What her content does is blends the physical and the spiritual worlds, right? And yeah, really, science to me, the way I look at science is like reconfirming the infinite, right? It's making the infinite more tangible, so we can actually utilize those things as a tool and get the results there. Because there's a lot of, if we don't have that, it's very easy to get caught up in kind of the mystical spiritual realms, and people say, oh, that's, but we have to be able to utilize it, we have to make it real, you
Mhm.
know and
Yeah, exactly.
that's what I love about the harmony of these things too. Everybody has their different, beliefs and philosophies. I think ultimately, like what you said, like any famous scientist or philosopher, artist, whatever, if you actually dig into their history and their teachings, they do have a very spiritual, religious, whatever it was, background that drove them forward to create what they were able to create.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, man. And just to close the loop on this, I'm
We're,
feeling detached, right? Let
yeah,
me think back to where we were.
we're talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how, as we take these steps and build ourselves up, it ultimately leads to self-actualization. And the closer we become to that, the more power we have to actually fulfill our own individual purpose.
Right, and yes, exactly, and I was closing the gap on like what it meant to be, the gap between like evolutionarily conserved life and this modern day. Basically, like yeah, like I was I don't want to call myself a victim, but in a way, I guess I was a victim of like a modern construct that ultimately was leading to neglect, like physiological and psychological neglect.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, if you're not consciously creating what you want, you're just kind of thrown into the system. You're at the will of the system,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So, baseline existence, most of life is kind of just blah, mundane, whatever, because people don't realize, like, hey, when you said you had an understanding of your mind, and I was talking about like we were talking about subconscious, all that stuff, and neuroplasticity. It's like that put you in the driver's seat to say, hey, I can actually create this. I can pull myself out of victimhood and start
Right.
moving forward.
Yeah. Exactly. So backing up to you know what I was describing with my clients, like they end up giving their body just like I did in this modern day, the foundation for clarity, for health, for presence. And when you feel more clear, more energized, more positive, more loving, more open, like just overall better and clearer, then you can tap into states of consciousness that otherwise seem like mystical and like a bunch of BS. Like I didn't realize that that's such a meaningful part of our existence. But in this modern world, we become so numb. We're glued to our phones, instant gratification. We like deplete our dopamine, which is our currency of motivation, drive, and purpose. We're depleting it, and we're desensitizing the center that makes life meaningful. And we're picking up vices because all of a sudden we become unhappy with who we are and what we're not doing, and we see everyone doing what we want to do, and we're not doing it. And it's just basically, man, it leads to a lot of frustration, and then we like try to numb this pain, and we take ourselves further and further and further and further away from the people that we actually can be, the human beings that we all have inside, the primal instincts that we have, and this passion for life that we all have within. So let's give our body, let's regulate our nervous system. Let's give our body the nutrients that it needs to thrive. Add in what the modern world leaves out. Let's move. Let's get sunlight. Let's do some grounding. Let's purify our water and our air and our relationships, and choose the best, really demand the best, elevate our standards of living. And anybody can do this. Like most of the stuff that I recommend, it's free. Most of the stuff that I help people to do, and the kind of changes they have to make physically and mentally, it's free. Like it doesn't cost anything to make the change, to choose that decision. However, because we have numbed ourselves so much, it's going to take a massive amount of accountability to start to change the trajectory of your life and your decision making. It's going to require the use of, tools and technologies that otherwise seem just like some kind of fad, but it just helps us accelerate this process because we have become so detached.
Yeah, and it's like when you feel what's happening is when somebody's improving, it's like their their life is the reflection of their state, their feeling, right? That's really what you want. They come from a kind of lower, stagnant, depleted state, and when we raise their whatever we're doing, whether it's science, spirituality, we're bringing them to a higher state, and they have a higher feeling, then their life shifts. What I was going to say something about that. Oh, the vices and stuff too, because the phone could be a vice, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is. What happens when we feel those lower states, right? If somebody is overweight, and they might, what happens is somebody might feel good, but then something happens and it resonates at that lower level, and that's when people go back to that vice, right? So it's like, we can't really, the potential is always there, but really any plan that we're following is to consistently progress and maintain, so we can lock in these higher states so we don't have the same temptation to go back to the vices, right? Because the only time we ever, take part in those vices is when we say, I'm stressed and this and that. It's just like, okay, whatever. So we just throw all the motivation out the window. It's like, okay, I'm gonna eat this thing, I'm gonna do this vice, whatever. When we're feeling good, you know, I would say it's nearly impossible to go back to those vices when we actually feel good. The mental clarity, the physical.
Exactly. When you see what's possible, man, when you see how good you can actually feel and how clear and energized you can be, it all of a sudden you become like repulsed by the
Yeah.
habits, decisions, and behaviors that numb pain. Like we need to face the pain. The obstacle is the way, and you need to get past that obstacle, and you're gonna learn and grow so much in the process.
Well, it's like once you feel better, you know better, right? And it's a lot of people that if they're consistently engaging with the vice, it's because that's all they know. That's all they know, right? When you create that gap between how they did feel and how they feel now, they're like, oh, I don't want to slide. But that feels like a kind of like jumping off a cliff. They're like, I don't want to slide back and crash that much, right? It's when
It is a leap of faith.
I quit. Yeah, exactly. I quit drinking 6 years ago, and the more and more I got away from it, before I like officially quit 6 years ago, the more I got away from it. Only if I had like one drink, I felt completely trashed the next day. I felt completely unclear. It was because my system was so clear, my energy was so refined. Just that little bit, I was like, no, no, no. I learned my lesson. I'm done. I'm putting that away for good. It just wasn't. It's like, why would you want to? If you know better, you have the responsibility to maintain that, right?
Dude, I used to be a pothead in high school. Like a real pothead.
Do
Like
you want
most
to get
people
into
wouldn't.
that? We can get into that. I love talking with
Sure.
people about. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think.
I only have a few more minutes, but I used to be a pothead.
Yeah,
Like that was the only way that I knew at the time to self-regulate when I was jacked up in amphetamines, and I got really into smoking weed. And dude, I haven't smoked now, and bro, I don't know, like I lost count.
yeah.
I've maybe smoked once or twice in the past 5 years, and I regretted it. It was like maybe with like someone in my family or sibling or friend, and whatever. But instantly, I'm just like, it's makes me more anxious. Like dude, I feel like I am high 24/7 in a good
Yeah.
way. Like
Oh yeah,
feels
yeah, yeah. You're
so
just like,
incredible. I feel like an alien, bro.
yeah,
And I hate to sound like like I'm full of myself, or like this is like something that is, dude,
It's
I'm just
almost like
like I feel so clear.
it feels like a sustainable adrenaline rush in a bit. Like when I work with people, it's because that's, in a more spiritual perspective on that. When you're sharing with others, it's coming through you first and going to them, right? So you get filled up, they get filled up. So you guys are both getting results at the same time. That's why it's so fulfilling to help other people and coach people and share what you know, because it's like, oh, you know, that guy's sharing, that guy's taking the responsibility to share. We're going to give him more. We're going to fill him up more energetically. And then you feel
Yeah,
just like a rush afterwards, right? And it's like,
exactly.
that's the new high. That's the new kind of like drug, is like to help people. We
My
don't
drug is
need,
helping people, and it fills my
yeah.
cup like you wouldn't believe, man. It fills me up, and it's very energetic work. Like it is an energy. You could say it's an exchange. It's not really an exchange. It's more like a synergy, but it
Yeah, it's a
requires a
sharing.
lot. And in order
Yeah.
to tolerate, again, it's tolerate has a negative connotation. In order to be able to handle all that energy, you have to uplift yourself. You have to invest in yourself. You have to have great sleep, great nutrition, and you have to have the presence to really connect to somebody and help them in a meaningful way. And
Yeah, your
so I
body's
have
the,
to practice what I preach in order to do what I do. And everybody should. Everybody should be a little selfish in order to truly be selfless.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, I
dude,
say that all the time.
yeah, I feel like, dude, I am literally like, it's like I'm on a limitless pill, but it's not a pill. It's just a lifestyle.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel incredible,
Yeah, it's
incredible.
all,
And
you gotta,
everybody should feel this way. Dude, if I can do this, and I know this sounds like so cliche, but if this kid that spent so many years with taking so many meds, being told by every fucking teacher, you will amount to nothing. You're not going to be successful. You're not going to get a good job. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. My parents thought I was going to be literally selling like bracelets on a beach or being a fishing guide. That's what my parents thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. My parents love me. They've always supported me, but they told me, they're like, we never knew you were going to be successful. Like, yeah, but like we're always here to support you. Like, we knew you were going to be happy because you love fishing, in video games, and like you're happy. But bro, it's like I thought I had a broken brain. Like I thought I was like special ed. Like when I first got like my diagnosis with my psychiatrist, they were like, "Oh yeah, this guy has dyslexia, ADD. Like you should consider sending him to a special school." And bro, now it's like I feel like I brought my genius to life because I gave my
yeah,
body the opportunity and I learned the mechanisms behind it and how it's ingrained in every single one of us.
you just have to unlock it. Yeah, I hate hearing people say, oh, I have depression, I have anxiety. It's like, there's physical things to look at, there's mental things to look at, and there's spiritual things to look at. And mostly it's like people aren't moving. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And there's something, it just ends up building up inside of them. It's just like, a lot of anxiety can be looked at as just unlived potential, right? It's energy coming in saying, hey, I want you to grow and expand and push forward, but they don't know how to utilize that. They don't know how to, there's something in their system that's stuck that they're not able to utilize that. And it just builds, builds, builds. And they say, oh, now I'm more worried and anxious and stuff like that. It's like, first step is always move your body. Once you move your body, once you do anything, just do anything. That will always lead to the next thing, because you'll burn off some of that kind of the stuck energy in your mind, in your body, whatever it is. Because like you said, it's like it's the body's the vessel, right? So it's like the energy is always coming in that, or to support the energy, that the fulfillment that you feel. If you can still do that stuff, but if you're internally sluggish, then you're not going to be able to utilize as much as that, and you're not going to be able to share as much.
Exactly.
I guess that Chuts, I'll just make it extremely quick for the weed, because it's funny that weed for the past, I don't know, say 20 years, everybody looked at it as like, oh, it's harmless. It's not that big of a deal. And you have some people that smoke multiple times a day. And it's looked
It's
at
not
as
harmless.
this, there's a sort of argument. Some people say it's a drug. It's not a drug. Ultimately, like whatever, but like, what does it do? And what I've observed, and what people that, I've smoked weed in the past too, but the people now coming to me, I've had people that smoked for, over a decade. They're now coming to me and saying, oh, I know what you're saying now. I feel apathetic. I feel sluggish. I did it as this calm, soothing, relaxing thing, but now like I'm not getting anything done in life. I feel very disconnected. I feel very on the high all the time. Even when they're not smoking, they feel very just like dulled and just, high, and they're not even smoking anymore. So all this stuff is coming to light now. How, especially like energetically, if I'm doing an energy healing on somebody, it's like putting tar, like heavy, stagnant energy in their field, and they're wondering why like life just becomes more small. It just continuously becomes smaller, and so they're not able to expand. Right? I know a lot of people that have been smoking for years. I don't even hear from them anymore because they just become like a hermit. They almost lock themselves away, they detach from the outside world. Their relationships fail. And I would, personally, I would look at putting that all back to the marijuana and the smoking and stuff. So I feel like it's cool that a lot of people are putting down alcohol, they're putting down weed, they're all these things that they deem socially normal. Like, like you were saying with like the system, right? The things that were deemed socially normal, those things are all now shifting. It's really cool to see.
Absolutely. I think there are some medical benefits to weed, and I might get canceled for this saying, oh, we might get canceled saying, weed is a cheap thrill that isn't actually helping you. But I understand that there are medical reasons and medical suggestions for weed, for marijuana. But I think for 99% of people, give or take,
Well,
it's
how did
just
actually
it's not the right decision.
I think maybe we can close off with this because this kind of goes back to the start of anybody's journey. How did you uh, discover neuroplasticity, right? Because before then, you're kind of were you hopeless? I mean, there's always a turning point between the impossible and the possible, and that's where a lot of people are. They say, "Oh, like I said this earlier, it's like people think it is what it is, and they have no control over it, right?" And ultimately, we want to be in the driver's seat and create our reality. So I understand where people say, "Oh, well, it is what it is, and I don't have any potential to grow or change." You're probably the same way going through high school, saying you were, dolled out on Adderall and stuff like that too. What was that first spark of the inspiration that you saw? Was it, a video, a mentor, a person who, whatever that sparked your path that created all this change?
You know what it was? Funny enough, the neuroplasticity happened by accident. Like learning about it happened by accident because I had originally signed up for a summer program while I was in high school at the University of Miami in infectious diseases and like viruses. And for whatever reason, that program didn't end up running and they kind of merged us into neuroscience. So it happened by mistake, which
Oh,
is like one of the best mistakes
that it,
that's ever happened. But then there was a moment, man, that you're describing. There was a specific moment where I realized that this was my calling and what I really needed to do. Because yeah, I started to learn about this and I started to feel better, and then I became like addicted to exercise, addicted to my aesthetics. Like there's a dark side to this too, right? And then eventually there was regression towards the mean. So like I was at a low point, and then I tried to compensate for it because I was so insecure and lacking confidence and like super
well, it's
skinny
an
and
expansion. It's with anything. It's like an expansion and a regression to a more mature version of that, right? Because
exactly.
we're really excited at first. We're like, oh, this is amazing. We do all these things, and
Yeah.
then we have to have a grounded level to build the foundation.
Yeah, like what
Yeah.
ended up happening to me was I got obsessed with like bodybuilding, and dude, I was like 6% body fat, like jacked, but
Dude,
I had like probably low testosterone because like I was too lean. All
what
I
year
cared
was
about was
that?
my appearance.
I
This
did.
was it was like
I
senior year of high school, freshman year of college.
Yeah, I competed on for 3 or 4 years in my early 20s. Did a ton of steroids, and I hate seeing. There's so much information about this now on social media and all these fitness influencers. They're like, oh, all these young fitness influencers are getting all these steroids. I'm like, that is the
Yeah,
absolute.
it's
That's
bullshit.
one of my biggest regrets is doing steroids and pushing myself to such an extreme because it was so unhealthy and it wasted so much time, energy, resources, focus in my early 20s. Oh, it's yeah, that's a maybe we'll do a whole another
I mean, I never
have to
got
set
around to
some
doing
up for.
steroids,
Oh yeah, but it's the
but
extreme part,
I did
you know.
have roommates that did, and it was crazy to see what they dealt with mentally and physically.
Yeah,
And I can
it's
understand why a lot of young guys, in this day and age, and instant gratification world, like people want to take steroids, and they're so available, it's so easy to get them. It's a shame.
yeah. Unfortunately for me, it was everybody was everyone was saying, "Oh, you're so motivated, you're so disciplined, you're this, you're that." I was pumping myself with extreme amounts of steroids. I spent one year, I spent over like $40,000 on steroids as a
Wow.
in my young 20s, and it goes back to what you're saying. It's instant gratification because I was getting that. I didn't know any better because I didn't have the right people around me, but I was getting that instant gratification. I was feeding off that, like negativity, and I wasn't really in alignment with myself, right? So that's another way to look at a disconnection, right? If you're pushing yourself to such an extreme, is that truly you, and why are you doing that?
Exactly. For me, it was like I was lacking confidence, and it's the only way that I knew to make myself feel good in the moment. It got to an extreme. Like I was extremely, extremely shredded. I thought I was going to get more attention from girls. I ended up getting attention from guys. Classic
Yes.
gym meme.
Yeah.
And then eventually I matured. But what actually the moment that you're describing, there was a moment like that, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah. Spark.
I switched. So I was pre med originally, and I did all my pre med requisites. Like I did organic chemistry and biochemistry, physics, etc. But I was still like lost. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't really know if that was my calling, but I thought I wanted to do it. I got a lot of shadowing experience, and that's when I realized I didn't. Anyway, the moment was I switched majors 3 times. Eventually, I switched over to exercise physiology because this was what actually helped me level up personally. And I was like, you know what? I have a passion for this already. I might as well study this. And my first day in one of these nutrition and physiology classes, I step into the class. The professor shows up, and I didn't realize this was the professor. I mean, this guy was like, imagine in his face, chiseled guy, super confident and clear and energized. And he was like this ridiculous triathlete and brilliant. Like, wow. Like the way that he took what he knew and helped us realize like how essential it is to like have this knowledge. Like every time I sat in one of these classes, I would be like, I can't believe I'm learning this about my body. And I can't believe I have to be here doing this major, paying this tuition as a 20 something year old to like learn this essential knowledge about my body. I would like look around the class, like, is no one else feeling this? Like, why are we here to learn about this? Like, everybody should know this. It was like a eureka moment. Every time I left the class, I knew more about my body and I felt better about my health. I literally leveled up every single class. And it wasn't just what he was showing us, it's that it wasn't just what he was telling us, it's what he was showing us directly and indirectly because it made a difference in his life and it changed the way that he showed up, how present and how brilliant he was, and the level of performance he was able to demand of his body. And when I saw that, bro, the living, breathing example of knowledge, applied knowledge, I was like, I want to be like this guy. Like this is what I want to do. I want to be like this guy. And I
Yeah.
remember he was offering an internship program. I thought everybody was gonna like run because we were in a massive auditorium. I thought everybody was gonna like run at him to be the first person to sign up for the program. Dude, I waited for the moment that the clock hit, the certain time for the end of the class. Like I literally ran over to this guy. I was the first person there, and I was like, I want to do your internship.
How
Dude, a
many other
couple years
people?
later, there were a few people, but like people just like walked over like slowly. I ran over there.
Yeah.
And dude, I ended up managing his internship, and then he ended up writing my recommendation letters. He ended up helping me find a sponsor for my graduate degree. So I was on a fully funded research scholarship, and I was a graduate assistant. I was still managing the internship, and he helped me start my master's even while I was in undergrad. Like I was the only undergrad student in a class full of PhDs learning about like chronic disease prevention, all because I saw something within him that I knew I had within me. I pursued it at all costs, built a relationship with him. And bro, he's the reason I am having this conversation with you today.
That's
Literally, he's
awesome.
the reason. Other people are the reason too, but he's one of the main reasons.
Yeah, he's one of those specific. Yeah, well, that's what it is. I tell people all the time because people have all these opinions about, oh, I want to change the world. Sort of like I think what you just described. If you want to change the world, change yourself because through changing yourself, you will inspire other people to change yourself. Not through telling them what to do, but being the thing and showing them what to do. Right?
Exactly. It's
It's a.
showing over telling always.
I think that's a good point. That's a good point to make for a wrap up. I
I
appreciate
think
it. Do you
so
have
too.
anything else to leave the audience? Instagram? Any how they can reach you?
Yeah, if anything I shared struck a chord or made sense and you want to learn more, you can just email me. We can talk. As simple as Andres, ANDRES at knowyourphysio.org, KNOWYOURPHYSIO.org, or visit my website, andrespreschel.com, or our website, knowyourphysio.org. You can find me on Instagram, and you'll get to see what we do, how we do it. And who knows, maybe you're a good fit for an experience like this. And I'd love to help you discover your science and optimize your life.
Great, great, appreciate it.
It's funny, my camera just overheated as soon as